Second event of 2023. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to our speaker, Emily Overton, who many of you will know as RM Girl. But just before we start, just a few things about housekeeping. If you can put either the questions either in the questions tab or in the chat tab, Sarah and I will monitor the questions and put them to Emily as we go through the presentation. Please be aware that Emily can't see the chat, so she's totally reliant on one of us actually telling her what's in the chat. Obviously, feel free to share opinions and suggestions, questions in the chat, but as always, I just ask that we keep it healthy and constructive, please. And so without any more ado, I'm going to hand over to Emily, who will take us over to take us through the next hour. So Emily, the stage is yours.
Hello. Hi everyone, my name is Emily Overton. I'm known as Records Management Girl, or for short RM Girl. I am here to talk to you today about where do we go from here. So basically, agile records management in a post-pandemic world. You're going to have to forgive my casualness, as it were. It's about 32 degrees in my office right now, and no, I'm not in Barbados. I'm in a conservatory that's basically been like, you know, it's a good greenhouse. So yeah, let's get on with the show. So those that don't know who I am, I run my own consulting as director of RM Girl Consulting. I have a postgraduate in records management and information rights, and I've made my way around the public sector, having been ex-civil servant, ex-NHS, ex-county and ex-city councils. There was the police, but we're not going to talk about that. They didn't want me in. But basically, I've been living and breathing records management since 2007. I've stopped counting now. It's kind of got to the point, is it 16 years? 7? Maths is not my forte. And as Elizabeth has said about her maths in many a time, is a bear of very little brain when it comes to maths. And once you run out of toes, pretty much that's it. We're going to go through a few basics initially because I'm not entirely sure the level of engagement that I've got on this call. And then we'll move on to the more meatier part of the presentation. If you're wondering who the dog was or is, his name is Rolo, and he was RM Dog, and was known for being my best friend, shall we say. But unfortunately, he's left us and gone over the Rainbow Bridge. But I feel like, because we're talking about the pandemic, the picture that I talk about of him giving guidance on how to wear a mask, I thought I would share still. So, I took this from the Information Record Management Society about a definition of what records management is. And I think it's really important to keep reminding ourselves that, you know, records management is a huge topic. You know, sort of like for a singular person to do it, it's so you have to really think about what are the important things and what you should be looking at and defining what your day-to-day role should be. But you can only do that with so many things, and we'll talk about them later. Now, when I was in university, we talked about the records management continuum, and as complex as it was or is, I found that it wasn't much use when trying to explain it to other people. And so the linear fashion of explaining it as a conveyor belt was born. So my infographic basically describing the 5 or 6, if you're counting archive, sections of the life cycle of a record, I found to be much more useful, and people got on board a lot easier. They say that I breathe colour into records management, but I think they're on about my infographics, if anything, and my bright red hair. When it comes down to your life cycle, I tend to find that I don't actually know if you can see my mouse, so I'm just going to explain it. But basically, I find that the life cycle tends to stop just after storage. So lots and lots of stuff goes into storage, but nothing ever gets deleted or archived or put back into creation, because we go, oh, I can't find it, it must be in storage, or we don't have it anymore, so therefore I'm just going to recreate the wheel. When actually we could be looking at alternate options for your records management of bringing stuff out of storage and back into use if it has a business need or business want to do so. So by all means, please do take a screenshot of this and share it, use it. As long as you leave my copyright on, I don't mind. FOI for public sector is obviously a lot more prolific in the public sector world, and this meeting specifically. So I took this from John Baines's blog, Information Rights and Wrongs, and it was actually back in 2014, and it's still relevant now because we keep on losing our understanding of how important records management is. And it seems that records management goes up and down the political spectrum depending on what disaster is happening at any one time. And I find that records management rarely gets the opportunity to be given its light. There's always something else that shines brighter than it. And I pretty much, every time I read the news, I'm always looking for records management related stuff. So my most favorite at the minute is that the orange buffoon in the US is being brought down by records management. Ha ha ha. And the fact that he kept the records in a bathroom. And some people saying that actually it's better to be in a bathroom than a ballroom. And I was like, how does that work? And they were saying that because the bathroom locks. I'm like, but the bathroom locks from the inside. So unless you're sat in with the records, it's not locked. Anyways, who's to argue with those kind of things? So yeah, when it comes down to the daily news, if you're not looking at the news and thinking, I bet there's records or data behind this, and if there isn't, I'd be very surprised. So yeah, by all means, please do put in the chat any things that you think records management is the thing that is to be considered as the source, because I'd be quite likely to agree with you, but I'd also love to see what other people are finding out there. The other thing is that I look at GDPR from a different angle. I decided to recreate my own acronym. So instead of General Data Protection Regulation, we've got Good Documented Practice with Records. Because I fundamentally don't believe that you cannot do GDPR without records management. And the question is, how many people know that? So I always say the three fundamentals of records management are knowing what you've got, why you've got it, and how long you need to keep it. And if you can't do those three things, how on earth are you saying that you are compliant with data protection? Because if you don't know what you've got, how on earth do you know what you're doing as a job? If you don't know why you've got it, well, what about your processing condition? And if you don't know how long to keep it, well, what about the storage limitation? What do you think on that point? Do you think I'm right? I've yet to have anybody argue with me, but I'm always happy for somebody to go up to the plate. But yes, I'm finding that we're not doing enough in terms of shouting about records management and how important it is. So if you'd like to join the campaign for records management being better, find me on social media. I'm more than happy to talk things through and share messages that other people are getting out there. And to be honest, that's where Records Management Girl started, RM Girl. It was off the back of the fact that there was an FOI man out there and I needed a decent name. FOI man's no longer in his self-employment role, but I'm pretty sure he'd be quite happy to talk FOI anywhere he goes. And RM Girl came out of it. Actually, I messaged him and said, I hope you don't mind, but I'm creating a superhero name just like FOI man. And he was like, I don't have monopoly over all superhero names. I was like, oh no, I'm just telling you nice. So yeah, that's where RM Girl came from, is that I was shouting about records management on Twitter. I was pretty much one of the only few that was doing it at the time. And I wanted to make sure, and I'm only one voice at the end of the day. And as loud as people think I am or can be, I'm not. I'm only one person at the end of the day. So I'm trying to rally around a crew that's wanting to shout about how good records management is and how people aren't doing their job if they don't know these things. But the question is, what causes records management to go wrong? I mean, the common denominator is people. But equally, you have your priorities, your money, your budget, and your workload. There's so many things that go ahead of how important records management is. But then we had the pandemic, and people went nuts. And we threw money at it. You know, it doesn't matter where you're placing the blame at the end of the day. There's always going to be a person to blame, but it's not just a person. It's not always just the one. There are many people who contribute to the culture, and it's something that has to learn to live, that you have to learn to live with whilst you want to make this change. But if I manage to find enough people that are interested in doing it, we're already richer from it. So hopefully you'll take this this presentation as a call to action, maybe. Who knows? So yeah, when it comes to records management, it's gone wrong. Now, the pandemic caused many things to basically be thrown up into the air. People were sent home with laptops by companies that didn't really have a working from home policy. And it was basically, we just need the business to keep going. So it went from nothing to everything overnight. And I'd hazard a guess that there are a fair few of you here online that would have had a program for records management working really well, and then it was shelved because the pandemic was in the way. That's not anybody's fault or anything like that, but I do think we need to address it as to whether or not we're in the right place now for sorting it out. So you kind of have to ask yourself the question, is the concrete foundation there? You know, so like your absolute basics of stuff, your tools and your toolkits, is everything there? You know, the first step for dealing with agile working and how it was happening, and, you know, is to move past the grief of your lost records management that you once had and to actually just relook at it as a whole. And admitting it is almost the first step of acknowledging what state your records management is in. How many people out there had that? Do leave notes in the chat, though I can't see them right now. I will see them afterwards. But yeah, is that if you were quite far forward in getting stuff done, and now you feel like, well, what do I do now? You know, so where do I start? The best part is to go through and give it an overall review. So you need to readdress your fundamentals. And the question is going to be, we're going to have a couple of slides that are just basically going to have some fundamentals on it, and we're going to talk through each of those slides. So the first things first is the records manager. Are you the records manager? I don't know who's in this group. It could be various different kind of people. But is the records manager on board still, or did they move on during the pandemic, or did they move on after the pandemic? And do you need a new records manager? But in any case, you need to look at the records manager's job description, because no doubt overnight, because of the changes that were made and the working from home, the role of the records manager may well have changed. So you need to have a look to see whether or not that job role is still what it once was, and actually does it need to be updated. It's kind of a straightforward one there. If you haven't got a records manager, the first question I would ask myself is why not? Because, you know, they are important and we are badass. But who is, you need to look at that from who is given the records management chalice, so to speak. So it doesn't matter what your job role is named. Whoever's responsible for the records management on a day-to-day basis, look at that job role to see whether or not it needs to be changed. And you maybe even consider changing their job title. But that's really just names. It's more about what you actually do. The next thing is your senior management buy-in. Have you updated them? When was the last time they heard from you? Now is an opportunity to speak up, because we're now getting past the point of where it's supposedly over. It's been deemed as by who as COVID-19 is no more. And so we need to start looking to the future. And the question is that when was you last at a senior management meeting, or when was the last time you sent a paper to them? Do they know what's happening on the ground? Who was your champion on the senior management board? And is it worth you having a one-to-one with them again? But before you do that, you also need to consider the CSIRO and the Caldecott Guardian as well. Are you using their weight in this process? Get hold of them, speak to them. You basically need to re-establish the relationships that you perhaps once had or didn't have but would like them now. So are you utilizing them? That's a good question, really, to actually just sit and inward look to go, could I do more with this? Could I speak to other people? Who is championing me from the top down? One of the main things that I found in all the consulting side of things is that until I'm brought on board, senior management rarely have heard of records management, what it does, because you've had to work really hard to get me through the door in the first place. So actually, senior management should know what records management does for the business. And if they don't know what to do, what it does, then you can inform them and use it as a learning piece, and potentially even give some training. What they will actually be aware of, though, is risk. The amount of people who don't have records management on the risk register fascinates me endlessly. So you need to be having a look at your risk management and your risk escalation. If you tell me right now that you don't have any records management risk, you're wrong. And there is always risk. There is always something to be thinking about that needs to be managed. And this is your tool for speaking to senior management and identifying the scores that are applied to records management. When it comes to risk, at the end of the day, you've got data protection to consider and FOI, so you've already got some risks there. If the records cannot be found, there is issues that are going to be coming up related to those two pieces. You're going to have issues with storage. If you've got on-site storage, there should be risk around, somebody getting hurt as a result of records being all over the place. You also have, if you're in public sector, dealing with end users. If you can't find their records, what's going to happen to them if you can't find them? So, for example, in the NHS, if you can't find the patient's records and they have a severe allergy to something, and then because you didn't have those records on time, something happens to them quite greater, then you've got also money challenges, because it may well come back to bite you from a legal point of view. If you don't know where to start, just have a look at all of the things that you think about records management and how it applies to a business, and go from there. Prior to the pandemic, I was hoping that a lot of people would have friendship with IT. So agile-wise, you need to be actually going back to the people who are responsible for giving out laptops for pandemic and talk about where they're at with that, who has access to what. Find out who your key people in IT are going to be to help you. I tend to find that IT do speak a different language. They speak nerd, but I also do too. And so I used to be that one person who was the go-between between the end user and IT to find out whether or not something was possible. And they are a unique set of people. And I say that with love. I think IT people generally are the misunderstood gang, and that actually you just need to work around what things they have that are preventing them from helping you. And then once you've got your friendship set up with IT, they can give you an informed report of who has access to what, where records are, What's the structure that's in place? Is there anything, you know, stopping you from deleting stuff? You know, there's so many questions that IT can answer. So find a friendship with IT. And if you had a friendship before, reignite it again. I understand that they like tea and biscuits. In addition, you should be looking for records management coordinators and champions. If you didn't already have them prior to the pandemic, then you really should be looking at getting them ASAP, because as I mentioned right at the very beginning, records management is a large topic and you can't do it by yourself. You know, so it's practically impossible to have your hands on all areas of your organization at once. Plate spinning is a great talent to have, but it's a difficult one. And if not, you should be looking at getting your CSIRO and Caldecott Guardian to ask heads of service to nominate people in areas to help you champion records management. They'll become your best friends. You know, they're going to be your spies on the ground. Your information and records management policy. Now, I find a lot of people have policies that are 20, 30, 40 pages long, and they may as well not exist because they are ridiculous. Everyone can create a policy, but can you adhere to it? Do you even have one? How many pages is it? 2, 3, 10, 40? Who knows? Do you have separate procedures? People need policies, something to hold them to accountability, even if they have received no joy in reading them. You need a foundation basis in which to build your records management empire on, and no doubt with pandemic, the agile change will have amended your policy, and you're going to have to cover a lot of gaps that never existed prior. Records management is a rather dry subject, and despite my long crusade to make it sexy, I think I've got an uphill battle on my hands. But that doesn't mean to say that we can't give it a good attempt. We may not have a legislation, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything about it. Do you have an up-to-date retention schedule? As you'll have heard about in various different places, there are retention schedules related to NHS or the ICO. There's a lot. What I'm basically trying to stammer out, not doing very well at, is that there are retention schedules in the public sector out there to have a look at. You know, there are going to be differences between organisations on who does what, but one of the ones that I particularly like is, mentioning no names, Elizabeth, Kent County Council's retention schedule is very good. So it's worth considering having a look at various different ones. If you want to contact me afterwards for some links, I'm more than happy to share them, because I don't have them on this presentation because you can't click them. I mean, the other thing to consider is that bearing in mind that the Goddard inquiry moratorium has been lifted, there's probably a lot of stuff that you can get rid of. And the way that I look at a retention schedule is when you're looking for stuff on your drive and on your agile working platforms, is that actually if you haven't got rid of loads of stuff that is very obviously needing to be deleted, it's basically leaves clogging a drain. Ultimately, you're going to take a really long time to find anything, and you are going to get stuck basically in any searches or trying to find information because all the wrong stuff is in the way. Training. I can't stipulate how important it is to have training in place for members of staff. It doesn't matter how easy it is, they'll always need training. So even if you gave them training before the pandemic, now is an opportunity to readdress that training, update it, and bring people back in and get them to have a look at what they are required to do now that we have an agile world in place. You should be able to utilize your intranet, populate it with some quick guides, 2-page subject-specific guides that show you how to do something, such as how to manage drives, how to prepare a box for offsite storage, how to scan, how to do email management, what to do with wet records, etc., etc. When I worked for Rotherham, Doncaster and Southampton NHS, we had 200 locations and 4,500 staff. And I created a staff handbook that was delivered with payslips. It gave them the basics that they needed to know, what was expected of them, how they did everything, top tips, disaster and recovery, and useful contacts, and also where they could find more information. So you don't necessarily have to do a face-to-face training session with them. There is alternate ways to get the message out there. But one thing that I have found is that the best place to look or find a way of talking to members of staff is using the communications and marketing areas within your organisation. Don't be alone in this and thinking, how am I going to get this out? It's a lot easier to do it with somebody who knows how and who knows the routes there are to get to people. So don't be alone in it. Off-site storage, basements. I feel like we're doing a bit of a whistle-stop tour of this, but I'm trying to be aware that, we don't have very much time, really. I could talk about records management till I'm blue in the face. As ever, if there's anything else, if I haven't gone into enough detail on certain things, I'm more than happy to discuss it. So, off-site storage. What's the betting that your off-site storage was either abandoned during the pandemic or it became not unused? So basements, for example, no one was ever going on site anymore, so no one received basements. So it was really, really important records that they couldn't possibly live without, didn't get touched for 18 months. I would suggest that we get hold of keys to basements, but beware, it could get ugly. Getting rid of information that people no longer need or is being created online. Actually, do we need the things that are in there now? Could we scan what's in there? Would it be easier if we're continuing to live in an agile world outside of the pandemic? Actually, how could we make use of that information to be better? Where would it be valued rather than stuck down in the basement or off-site storage? Are you calling back too much stuff from off-site storage that it could actually be better if they just scanned it straight to people on Agile? Have you got problems with where records are being taken home because they're paper and we're not fully digital? And I doubt we ever will be, not for many, many years, and I definitely won't be here, I think, if it ever does happen. But your off-site storage could do so many other things for you. So looking at your scanning, whether you're doing it bulk or whether you're doing it scanned on demand, is two different things. Back scanning has the potential to be very useful, but it also is very expensive. Scan on demand is problematic on the fact that you need somewhere to put those records unless you're willing to pay storage, but online storage, or get it transferred to you for you to put it on the drive. But then you need to talk to your IT, because actually some of those files, especially if they're color, are going to be quite big. So there's many things to consider. This is not an easy decision to make, but it's worthwhile considering it in the huge mix that we have, because that will help you define where you take your program going forward. This was a picture of me. It's not my most flattering outfit, if I'm honest. But basically is that I went down to a basement that had been flooded, and there were mold spores. There were things that were biting ants and all sorts of things down there. So I wasn't taking any chances at all. I just thought it would entertain. I'm kind of proud of that outfit because it's just as it felt just as ridiculous as it actually looks. But you need to actually think your health and safety when you're looking at off-site storages / basements being the more problematic one. Off-site storage, I'd like to think that you all have professional off-site storage rather than just a shed in a field, but we'll see, because I have seen sheds in fields. But realistically, with Agile and the pandemic being thrown together, is your online storage in a state? The answer that I'm hazarding a guess is there's a lot of people nodding right now that, our drives that sit here and become problematic by themselves, whether it's because you've introduced SharePoint or not, whether you brought in an IRMS and people are still using drives. And as I guess there's still people out there still using the C drive, even though we've told them multiple times, don't store anything locally on the laptop. And it's like, well, what happens if I can't get access to the network? I might still need it. But no, don't store anything on the C drive. But there are still, to this day, going to be people that are storing stuff on the local hardware. Have you had the opportunity to really reassess how people are using their online topics, online files? Are they in the right place? Do you need to look at a new classification? Would it be best to move on to an IRMS? You know, you need to plan all these things out. So when you're talking to senior management and you're updating them with where we're at, you need to be realistic of A, what you need, and B, how much it's going to cost, and C, how long it's going to take to put it in. Almost kind of going back down to the fundamentals of what do you need, what do you have, how why do you need it, and how long do you keep it. They apply to speaking to senior management about the tools that you need when looking at reassessing your records management. I'm finding it very difficult. I sat here for a while looking at this presentation, and I found it very difficult to pick up where we could talk about post-pandemic without looking at the overview of everything, because I feel we would do a disjustice to all of the things that you had done prior to pandemic, because there's quite a few that probably just need a bit of a uplift and a bit of a change here and there. And yeah, the concept of just kind of going, you know what, get rid of all that, let's start afresh, feels a little bit too dismissive of the work that has been done in the past. So don't put your records management plans into storage and never look at them ever again. Reassess them, pull them out, pick them out, and use them as a tool for going forward with. But do remember, please, that change management is going to be a crucial thing to consider when bringing anything records management in that requires the end user to change. This is called something that is, I can't remember, it's addressed as the bell, I can't remember exactly, it'll come to me later. But basically is that you're going to have a lot of people out there who would be your early adopters and innovators. So those people who are likely to put themselves forward or be picked by the heads of service to help you with records management are going to be your ambassadors. They're going to be people that are fed up with doing lots of things and never getting anywhere. Or there's going to be a filing room that annoys them endlessly that they want to get sorted. And those are your ambassadors and your supporters. Now, obviously, you're going to get a lot of people at the very end, the people who do not want to change. They are not willing, they do not want. But the chances of them still being around right now are fewer than they were prior to the pandemic, because we had to force technology on people. You had to go with the flow. You had to change how you did things because you had to work from home. And a lot of people didn't like it, and so they would have probably left. So those that are going to be your defectors and your adversaries are fewer than they were prior to the pandemic. So do we have the pandemic to thank? No, not really, because we lost a lot of people, unfortunately. But in any case, is that they will be the last people that you're having to kick into play, and those are the people that you can bring up with the senior people and their managers. But use your ambassadors and your supporters with your records management, because they're going to help you in such a most welcomed way. So please don't forget that there are other people out there. And that also includes the community in information records management from other organizations. Learn from them on how you do stuff. How did they overcome it? How did they find it was implementing records management? There's going to be a lot of people out there, and taking opportunity to meet with others, still look at speaking to other organizations and how they've dealt with certain challenges and change management especially. Because if you want to change the way that say for instance, a defector works, you might need to speak to their secretary and bring their secretary in on training and all those kind of things. So using different techniques with different types of people is the best option. I am coming to the end here. It has gone faster than I expected. It may be because I spoke at 1,000 miles an hour, for which I apologise. But I'm always happy to talk stuff and answer any questions that may be had shortly. You have the opportunity to sign up to my tribe newsletter. It hasn't had a newsletter recently because I struggled after losing RM Dog, but I am trying to pick it up. Another option is that I can send you out a records management coin where you can flip it and decide whether you keep it forever or you burn it all. And last but not least, those are my details if you want to get in contact. I do have a couple of hashtags on Twitter. That's my main place that you'll find me, loitering around the ever-dying Twitter. But yes, if there's anything that I can do to help, I'm more than happy to. And yeah, over to you, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you, Emily. We don't actually have any questions in the chat at the moment. We've had some comments, which obviously you'll be able to have a look at. But now's the opportunity. We've got probably about 20 minutes left for anyone who would like to quiz Emily on varying subjects. So we have the first question has just come in. Cecily says, love this presentation, Emily, super inspiring. What are your thoughts on the systems now used for records management but are not living up to the ISO 30301 standard for records management systems?
Oh, that's there are many different ways of sorting your records management out, and they may not always confine to certain systems, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad. It means that there is, a further piece of work that you might need to do in terms of your risk as to, well, if it doesn't do that, what are you doing to prevent something bad happening? So like I said further back in the presentation, have a look at your risk when identifying a system that does what you feel like it needs to do, but doesn't, subscribe to 30301. That's really hard to say. But yeah, the opportunity to look at a piece of software and identify its flaws, because a lot of systems don't always do everything. An example being SharePoint is that there are many sections of SharePoint that are left out to keep a gap for other people, add-ons and that kind of thing. So you're trying to find something that does everything is hard work. Is that a vague enough answer?
Thank you, Emily. So Simon has said, thanks, Emily, very informative. How has more working from home... Oh, hang on, somebody else has just put a question in and it's flipped my chat down. How has more working from home post-pandemic changed records management at all in your view?
No, I don't feel it has, to be honest. I feel that records management is what it has always been, as excellent. But I feel that it hasn't been given its shining light, opportunity to say that there's always going to be something going wrong. But I feel that records management can always go that extra mile to preventing things from going wrong. Has it changed my view? I don't feel it has. I feel that, it's just another way of doing it. So when working from home, you need to work more digitally than, say, for instance, when you were working in the office, and you need to subscribe to other ways of doing things than what you previously did in the office. So you're still doing records management, you're just having to do it in different ways.
Okay. Thank you. So Anne has asked, with regard to RM system, is it a good rule of thumb to ask, is it good enough? And if it is, just go with it while looking for opportunity to improve?
You need to look at what it does, and does it do what you need it to do going forward? Sort of like what are your what, I can't think of the word. What are your hard lines? What do you absolutely need it to do? I'm trying to think of what the acronym was. It's the must do, should do, could do, won't do. I can't think what it's called. But basically look at the things that you absolutely need to do that are non-negotiable, and then work down from there. Nice to haves, going with that kind of flow. And I mean, anything that you do that's bringing in a new system, as long as it does at least your must-haves, it's always going to be an opportunity to improve. Is it Moscow? Must have. Oh, I don't know. It's going to bug me now until the end of the day. I'm sure of it. Yeah. I think I've finished there. Sorry, Peter, is it the next one?
Peter's made a comment about assets, but it's more of a comment than a question. James has asked a question about email, which I suspect could probably take the rest of the day. So I'm kind of going to suggest that there are a number of IRMS webinars coming up about good email management. And I will have a look in a minute, or I will ask Sarah to just have a look and pop some links in the chat, because I know IRMS London are doing some online things about email management. So it might be better to cover that there.
As you say, email management is, we'll be here until the next week talking about it. But basically is that I found that the quick guide, having a 2-page process of how to deal with records management, quite useful. And I'm more than happy to talk about it afterwards.
Okay, so Pete's come up with the question, which I think probably everybody has had the issue with, which is, have you found that organisations rolled out apps such as Teams at the start of lockdown without considering the information governance implications, such as Teams chat and Teams chat retention? And I think certainly yes in our organisation. But Emily, what do you?
It makes my records management heart hurt when thinking about Microsoft Teams. It's just so chaotic. I haven't really. I've kind of looked in the hole that is Microsoft Teams and gone, that's nice, and then walked away from it, because it just seems like it's a burning pile of, oh my god. So yeah, Teams. I'm going to squirm on the spot and say, let's talk about it afterwards.
Okay, yeah. I think the answer to the question is yes. I think that there probably aren't many organisations that didn't do that. So I think that the answer to the question is yes. So there are various people who have made comments in response to other people's. I'm just trying to. So Andrea has commented that Teams is great, but the records management devil. So I guess that's
yes, I very much agree. Oh, and I did get it right. It's Moscow. Thank you, Andrea. That's going to help me sleep tonight. People working in silos, and the risk is to you do have that situation, is that you need to keep your RM herd, as you've called it. So my tribe, as I call everyone that comes onto the newsletter, is that you do need to up your digital comms and your meetings to keep involved with those kind of people that could potentially come by themselves. Make sure that you're using your champions to keep their people informed. Yes, Neil, we're applying Teams solution on the Defence Academy where I work. We'll let you know how that goes. Do let us know if it's good or bad. We'd like to know what your lessons learnt were from that, Neil. We are expecting a report. Thank you very much. Similar with WhatsApp. Oh my God, who's using WhatsApp? No! Teams is a tool. Apply existing policies for other tools to Teams. For example, Jabber retention periods. That's nice, Brendan. I'm just kidding. I don't know what any of that means, but yes. We are fortunate in what we have been able to agree a clear retention time for Teams records with IT. And yes, but Simon, have you actually successfully deleted anything? That's my question. Is that, has it successfully deleted and you actually been successful? And then we got to the end. Inform You is the app from Inform You Solutions, headed up by former. Oh, right, okay. Yeah, I think we're coming to the end of questions, and that gives us nicely for people to go and get a cup of tea and go before they get back to work.
Okay, so that's been brilliant. Thank you so much, Emily, for sharing that with us. I think although the World Health Organization may now have said that COVID is now endemic rather than pandemic, it would be quite nice to get records management back to the point where it is endemic rather than being reactive. So I think this has been a good start for us to actually start thinking about these things, and it will be very interesting to see how much of the lessons learned from the COVID inquiry will relate to how records were retained and how much of it will relate to the different actions that people took. So I think that's going to be a very interesting outcome to see how records management may or may not have improved how the COVID response was made.
I'm doing jobs at the minute where I'm being brought on to help with the COVID inquiry and ensuring that any evidence that is being used is being put in the right place so that it can be accessed, and looking at timelines and stuff like that of where there may be missing evidence and where there were decisions that were made. So that's the kind of thing that I get brought into nowadays. Thank you very much for the opportunity for me to speak, Elizabeth. It's always a pleasure. And thank you to everybody out there. By all means, I'll find you on socials or on my newsletter. All the best, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. If we can end the event now, please.